I am Dave, 10-year intellectual property attorney dealing with everything from patents, copyrights, trade secrets, as well as trademarks. And hey, look, I got a really good one for you guys today, particularly the fans of UGG. Now, if you wear UGG boots, UGG clothing, it seems like UGG it sells more than just shoes and things like that, boots or whatnot. You may be interested in want to pay attention for this one. I think I was watching a Dame Dash interview. For those of you know Dame Dash, hip hop industry, former partner of Jay-Z, and he was talking about him and Kevin Hart fell out because Kevin Hart was wearing some Uggs, and I guess Dame was clowning him about it, and there went that relationship. But I got a good one. I got a good one for you guys today, and I think this is going to be important because it's really going to underscore the importance of filing a trademark. Not only filing a trademark where you are currently using a mark, but at least considering filing a trademark in other countries as well. And because you will see why I said that in a little bit, but this was a good one. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And before I pull up the article, we're going to read from the New York Post. I want to say, please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, as well as hit the subscribe button to be a part of the IP community. I would love to have you guys a part of the IP community. So let's go here. We're going to get right off into it. I'm not going to keep you guys long. So this, again, fresh off the press, I guess January 14th, 2025, which today is the 15th. So this came out yesterday afternoon. Australian UGG retailer forced to change his name over the U.S. shoe giant. So let me paint the picture here. You had a UGG retailer that was a UGG company, a UGG shoe company that was in Australia, and based on the UGG retailer here in the U.S., they essentially forced the UGG retailer in Australia to kind of rebrand, but it's just not any old rebrand. That UGG retailer in Australia has been around for 50 plus years, 5 generations. So just think about that. Just think of you have a company, you've been around for 50 plus years, 5 decades, and all of a sudden you have to rebrand. Talking about a bad day at the office, you're talking about 50 years of work went down the drain just because you can't sell your product in other countries, under the name that you sell it in your home country. And hence, that's why you at least should consider filing for trademark protection, not only in your country to the extent that you can get it in, but in other countries that you're looking to go into sooner rather than later. And I, definitely, don't let 50 years go by. So let's pull back up the article and just get into it. A nearly decade-long legal battle, so this has been going around some time, has resulted in an iconic Australian brand having to change its name when shipping overseas. Todd Springthorpe from UGG since 1974, and that's weird, but UGG since 1974 is actually the name of the brand from the Australian retailer. Said that the brand was being sued by Deckers Outdoor Corporation, a U.S. shoe company, over the trademark to the word UGG in a video posted on TikTok on Tuesday. So essentially, you have two things going on. You have UGG since 1974. That's the retailer in Australia, and then you have Deckers Outdoor, which is all the Uggs that you see here in the U.S., that's owned by Deckers Outdoors, which they have a trademark on. We've been proudly making Australian boots for over 5 decades and 3 generations. We also own the trademark in Australia and New Zealand, where the boots originated, where UGG boots originated. So just think about that. So these UGG boots, we think them here in the U.S., and you see them around. These UGG boots originated in Australia. And they've been doing this since 1974, as the name implies, UGG since 1974. They've been making and selling UGG boots. And it seems like they have trademarks, at least in Australia, as well as New Zealand, where the boots originated. He explained the lawsuit from Deckers made it hard for the brand to share their boots with people outside of Australia and New Zealand. So it seems like, again, Todd, the owner of UGG since 1974, which I think is an interesting name, they're trying to share this thing outside of Australia as well as New Zealand, but Deckers Outdoor Corporation, which owns a trademark for the Uggs, as we know here, at least in the U.S., is making it difficult. Let's continue to read. See, these is the Ugg boots that's owned by Decker Outdoors. I actually bought a few of my lady friends some Uggs back in the day, but I've never owned a pair myself. Apparently, you can wear them as men. So let's continue with the article. Springthorpe, who is the grandson of the founders Arthur and Faye, said it was extremely hard to fight a lawsuit against a multi-billion-dollar company. It meant the brand would no longer be known as UGG since 1974 outside of Australia and New Zealand. Instead, it would be called since 1974. So again, I'm assuming that the 1974 is when they started. And again, the Australia shoemaker, name is UGG since 1974, but they had to drop the UGG because of Deckers Corporation that owns the trademark UGG here in the U.S. as well as in other countries around the world. Based on them putting pressure on the Australian company UGG since 1974, they had to drop UGG and only call themselves since 1974. Let's go on. Springthorpe continues to say, he said that the brand hasn't changed who UGG since 1974 was or what it believed in. We are the original and we will still be the original no matter what our label says on the back of our boots, he said. The lawsuit is still ongoing. In Australian, UGG is a generic term for any sheepskin boots that have been made since the 1930s. It was popularized by surfers in the 1960s. By the time UGG since 1974, UGG was becoming the accepted term for the sheepskin shoe. Another man, completely unrelated to UGG since 1974, was distributing another Australian brand, UGGs, in the U.S. However, this man then sold the trademark. Eventually, it ended up in the hands of Deckers Outdoor Corporation. Deckers argued that it had legally purchased UGG from the Australian entrepreneur Brian Smith in 1995. The name UGG Australia was then trademarked. Deckers Outdoor Corporation has this trademark in 130 countries, which is crazy. I mean, you start to think about it. I know we think of the U.S. as being a dominant country, and obviously there's other countries around, but you're like, man, there's 130 countries around the world, and there's probably even more than that. It said American shoppers knew UGG as a brand name rather than a generic term like the Aussies. The lawsuit began in 2016 after Deckers Corporation, Outdoor Corporation, took Australian leather, which has owned UGG since 1974, for copyright infringement. So it seems like they have some other stuff in the works as well. And that's pretty much it. So let me sum up this article because I think this underscores a number of points. And I've kind of made prior videos where if you have a generic term, then you're not able to get a trademark on a generic term. So typically you have 4 classes of marks. You have a generic term, which you can never get a trademark if it's a generic term. You have a descriptive term, which is a descriptive mark, which you can't get a trademark originally, but once it acquires secondary meaning, you can potentially get a trademark on that term. So in other words, with a descriptive mark, you can get trademark protection later on, but not at the beginning. Then an arbitrary mark, or you have 5 terms. So you have a suggestive mark, which you can get a trademark on at the beginning. Then you have arbitrary and fanciful marks, which you can also get a trademark on at the beginning. I'm not going to break down what each of those marks or examples of each of those marks. I've made prior videos. Go check out, please. That kind of talks about each of those marks and kind of examples of it. But a generic mark, just know, and it's not just in the US, but in other countries as well, a generic mark you can never get a trademark on. And it seems like in this case, what's considered a generic mark in one country may not be considered a generic mark in another country. So in this case, obviously UGG, which we all know is not a generic mark here in the US. That's why Deckers Corporation was able to own that trademark. It seems like they bought the trademark off of somebody else in 1995. Whereas in Australia, UGG is a generic term and you cannot get a trademark on that. So it seems like the Australian company, they weren't able to get a trademark on the term UGG. So that's probably why they're calling UGG since 1974, which I think is still a crazy term. And they've been around for 50 years. So I would imagine since 1974. So as opposed to filing for trademark protection for the word UGG in other countries, or at least the term UGG since 1974 in other countries, they never did it. But now, again, Deckers Corporation, and when you're talking about a U.S. company, it's all about business. It's all about making money. It's all about kind of competition. UGG, the Deckers Corporation, not only have the trademark term here in the U.S., but it also has it in 129 other countries around the world. So when an Australian company is trying to, sell this thing outside of Australia and New Zealand, the U.S. company is like, no, we own the trademark. So you can't use the word UGG in anything. That's why they dropped in and is going with since 1974. But the big caveat for this is it should have never got to this point. As they said, the Deckers Corporation bought it in 1995, and I'll even show you even something more that I was kind of researching. Like, okay, how long has this been around? How long has UGG, the term UGG, been around? So if you look on Google here, the UGG brand, the U.S. brand we're talking about, was founded in 1978 by Australian surfer Brian Smith, which I think they even said in the lawsuit. So just talking about the dates here, the U.S. brand UGG was founded in 1978, but as the Australian brand name suggests, that was founded in 1974. So the importance of filing a trademark sooner rather than later, because of UGG 1974, and we all know US is one of the hot markets. So if UGG 1974 back in 1974 would have filed that trademark in the US, which is, again, for those of you watching this around the country, around the world, I should say, watching the video or watching a podcast or watching the YouTube channel, if you want to file in your home country first, great. By all means, do it. But the second country that you should be sure to file a trademark application in is the US. And as I said before, you have to file for trademark protection, just like patent protection, just like copyright protection in each country that you're looking to go in. So if you have a trademark in China, that doesn't give you trademark protection in the US. You have to file for trademark protection in the US. If you have a trademark protection in the US, that doesn't give you trademark protection in China. You have to file for trademark protection in China. So if you're outside of the US, you're trying to file in your home country first, great. But the second country that you need to be able to figure out how to file a trademark application is the US, because that's the biggest market. And if you're in the US, obviously you need to be filing first in the US. With this Australian company, UGG, if they would have filed it back in 1974 or 5 or 6 or 7, they would have filed that trademark UGG since 1974 in the US, then the UGG as we know it would have never existed. The UGG that's owned by Decker Corporation would have never existed. But because they didn't file that US trademark application, and ultimately Decker's Outdoors, the UGG as we know it, essentially were able to get the trademark to the term UGG, then that essentially prevented UGG 1974 in Australia from filing a trademark, or from even using, forget filing a trademark, they can't even sell their product under the term UGG 1974 in other countries outside of New Zealand and Australia. In Australia, the only time where they can kind of file it there, because the term UGG is a generic term. It seems like they maybe have a trademark in New Zealand, which is weird why they file it in New Zealand. Maybe New Zealand is a generic, they consider UGG as being a generic term, but it should have never got to that point. UGG 1974 in Australia, the Australian company, they literally lost the rights to make millions, if not billions of dollars by being able to ship their product to other people around the world just because they didn't file for trademark protection in the US as well as other countries way back when they opened. I get it. This stuff can cost money, definitely not nearly as expensive as patents, but to the extent that you're really serious about trying to create a brand and a worldwide brand, I get it. File first in file first in your home country if you're outside of the US. But at some point over the next few years, you need to be trying to file or scrape up some money to file in the US. It could be detrimental if you don't, because some company in the US or some person in the US is all about business, all about competition, it's all about getting a one-up on person. And I can guarantee you, to the extent that that joint starts to kind of gain popularity, somebody's going to file in the US. And once they file in the US, it's game over. You kind of feel bad for the Australian shoemaker of Uggs, because again, they should have had rightful ownership to the term Uggs, because they started before the actual Uggs as we know here in the US, that's owned by the Decker Corporation. But because they did not file in the US, as well as other countries around the world, they literally have to change their branding, change something that's been around for 50 years, 3 generations. So again, talk about a bad day. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. I would love to hear from you in the comment section. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this fair? Clearly it's fair and it's legal, but kind of what do you think about it from a kind of moral perspective? Again, I'll tell you what, man, it's all business here in the US. So I would love to hear from what you guys think in the comment section. Again, please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, as well as hit the subscribe button to be a part of the IP community, where we talk about current events, whether fortunate or unfortunate, as well as interviews, Shark Tank breakdowns, infringement actions, everything intellectual property as the name suggests. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.